Welcome to your Spiritual Besties podcast. I'm Lauren Leduc.
And I'm Rashida McCoy. We're here to laugh, cry, learn, and connect with you.
We discuss anything and everything from our everyday lives to the magical, mystical, and woo-woo.
So take a deep breath, grab a cup of tea,
and set an intention to receive, because you deserve it, bestie.
Hey, Lauren. How's it going?
It's going well. Oh, you know what I was going to tell you that I forgot to tell you today is I took Gemma and we saw the Barbie movie yesterday.
Oh, how was that?
It was really good. It's definitely not like made for 2-year-olds, but because it's very adult. But I was like, it's probably better to take a 2-year-old who like totally doesn't know what's going on than like
was there a
9
lot
or
of
10-year-old or
innuendos?
something like that. There were, and it wasn't like crazy inappropriate, but it's adult in its themes. It's deeply rooted in like feminism and anti-patriarchy, but also like criticizing feminism in a way, and it's really very intelligent and interesting, and but she liked the bright colors, and we just sat at the back of the theater because she's still learning how to go to the movies right now, and we went in the middle of the day, but I was like, I really want to go see this, and yeah, I'm still thinking about it for sure.
I guess I need to go see it. I did see that came out, and I haven't really thought about going to see it. And kudos to you for taking Gemma to the movies, because the only movie Macy has been to has been the drive-in theater, because she can get up and run around. So
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, now you can pick your seats for the movies. So like I pick them in the middle of the day. Hardly anybody's there. Nobody's around us. So hopefully it's not too disturbing if she gets up. And there are a couple of musical numbers toward the end. So it worked really well that she could get up and dance. And
Oh, I love that so much. It makes me now think that I need to take Macy to I need to like be in the know of like the movies that are coming out for her age group. I think that'll be a really fun thing to do for the two of us.
There is a new Disney princess movie. I don't think it's coming out till like Thanksgiving or Christmas though, called Wish. And that would be like a great first movie to take her to probably.
Yeah, she'll be 5 then, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't really know what the story is, but it looks beautiful and the music already sounds really good. And it's like well, it's not the first Black Disney princess, but she's the first one in a long time, I guess, since probably Princess Tiana.
Okay.
Just like beautiful braids in her hair.
Oh, I love that.
And
Okay. Now I need to do a little trailer looking and get her excited about going. I think that'd be great.
yeah, I'm excited to go to that movie because I've taken Gemma now to. We went to see Elemental a couple weeks ago. Oh, and The Little Mermaid. That was the first movie that I took her to, and that was awesome too. Have you guys?
Was
You haven't
it?
gotten? Have you haven't? Oh my gosh! You have to go see The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, I have not been anywhere. So, you know what? I actually might take Macy to that first. It's so funny, like you brought that up. I remember when a friend of mine showed me the trailer. I can't remember who it was. And I was like, oh my gosh, Daniel, look, it's a Black Little Mermaid. And he goes, oh, that's awesome. And Macy goes, a Black Little Mermaid? Let me see. Oh, I like her. And then like, she overheard like some of the controversy that I saw online, and she was like, why would anybody not like the Little Mermaid, mommy? So it's like I love like, even seeing things from the child's eyes. I'm like, you're right, kiddo, you're right. Like, I don't know, whoever says it ruins their childhood is just crazy. Like, she understands what I'm saying, right? But still having those like conversations with her, I think is really important for her to see. Like, some people don't like, people because of the color of their skin, unfortunately, but we are kind and we love, and everyone is the same. So, I find it really needful for me to still like not shield her from that.
Yeah.
But in a way that's like open and honest and caring, and allowing her to like see, because I think her intuition will develop as well from these conversations when she gets into situations on her own that she may come across that, because even though she's very, very light skinned, Maciana is still, you know, she's mixed, she's Black. So yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I know we started off on a light note with like
No, it's okay. I'm
movies,
so,
but
like I'm so happy that you shared that, and I just it's hard enough, like, raising kids in this world, I think, and preserving their sensitivity and kindness and, um, and then to also have to explain to them that some people are going to automatically not like them because of their skin color, and then for to release your kiddos into the world and, like, know that they might encounter those things, like, I don't know, it's really heartbreaking, and I don't know. I wanna say I'm
yeah.
sorry, but it's like,
It's
I don't
yeah,
know.
it like you can't really, and it's I think, like we talked about a while ago in our August Oracle, like this is the path that we chose. Our kiddos chose this too. It really, I want to say it was our first intuitive reading with Melody that it really like hit me hard, because, that was a concern for her
Mhm.
with her son. And, I have a son now as well. And yes, he is light skinned, but he is still Black. You were going to see the curly hair, and they get really dark in the summertime. And it's a fact of life. It's not, this made up thing. And it's, I think if we do our parts, talk about it, and not only just within the family, but without outside of the family, like Lauren and I, you and I, we chat often about things like this. um it just creates that world, one that we do want to see, and also allows our kids to like see the truth. I think when I was growing up, I felt this divide because of the color of my skin, but it wasn't really talked about. It was always like an us versus them type of deal. And so I want to be honest. I want to be open. I want to be age appropriate as well. And I know these conversations are going to dial up in intensity as they get older. And starting now, though, I feel like it'll be just preparation for those moments later
Yeah.
on.
The good thing about now as compared to when we were kids is that, like, there are so many wonderful books and even
Yeah.
shows, like, there's so much help out there because people have this awareness and then this desire to be, like, anti-racist and to create a more peaceful, loving world, and to not be in this, like, weird us versus them mentality, and to, like, realistically look at the past and heal from it, you know? So it's nice to,
Yes.
like to have books on our shelves. Like I have Anti-Racist Baby on the shelf and several others that just, talk about it in a simple way that kids can understand. And then the conversations will become more nuanced as we become older and
Yeah.
or as they become older. So yeah, thank you to
No.
everyone out there who's doing the work and
Doing the
helping us
work.
parents out
Yeah.
for sure.
And
Um,
just no, I just wanted to speak to that one more thing, and it's not just the um us versus them as well. It's also like the within. I actually
mhm.
had to have a conversation with my mother a little while ago about the term good hair. I think I
Mm,
even talked to you about this, Lauren.
yeah, you did.
Um and you know, I don't want to say I hate that term, but damn if I don't hate that term, because growing up all my life, I thought I didn't have the good hair. This was this look that you had to go to. Lauren, for all intents and purposes, you had good hair. And then also when it came to, me and other Black girls, my hair wasn't curly enough, or it was too um, textured. It was too tight. My coils were kinky, coily, and not curly. And so I think that's also too where self love begins with our kiddos too. No matter what they have, and no matter what challenges we have with them in learning something as simple as their hair, like it's how you speak to them and what you say. You know, we talk to Maciana, and her hair gets a little knotty sometimes because she likes to roll around and everything, and that's okay. We just have to take care of it. And then, oh my goodness, look, when we take care of it and give it kindness, look how amazing it feels. Not so much that it looks, right? And so, self love too, as a parent, is not just for us, it's for them as well. So, thank you. I just felt the need to share that as well.
Yeah. I mean, by gifting kids self-love, we are gifting them freedom.
Mm.
Um, like, I don't know. You probably can speak to this much better than I can because I'm not Black, but I know like whenever someone's oppressed, so I can speak to it as like a woman. Um, it's not the same amongst like different colors of skin for women and stuff, but just let's speak to women in general. They've historically been oppressed. Then when you're oppressed, like you start infighting in your own group because like you're fighting for like some feeling of power. So like what's your hair look like? What does your body look like? How much money do you have? Like, what religion do you practice? There are all these like little things to start picking at each other with because it's how people deal with this lack of freedom, I suppose. But like that self-love, that like just acknowledging like who I am is good the way it is, like that provides freedom from oppression, right?
Oh, absolutely. And 100%. And you're right. Like it is like amongst women, but also, amongst people of color, Black people. Like
Mhm.
it's one of those things, Lauren, like I can speak to this. Like having lighter skin was something that was, put you on a pedestal. I don't know why. Right? I don't know what it is about it. I don't know why we did that to each other. But yeah, within school, within some circles of mine, like I noticed that. And it's sad. It's sad because we're not all meant to be one color. We're not all meant to have light skin. We're not all meant to look a certain way. And the fact that we associate, even kiddos do this, like they did a study where they associate skin tones with good or bad.
Yeah.
It like broke my heart to see a kid automatically assume the black baby doll was bad because it was
Mhm.
black, Lauren. How fucked is that?
Yeah,
Like,
extremely.
yeah. So, but you're absolutely right when it comes. It's like almost this we're oppressed, but we put ourselves in our own little caste system, right? So, I don't know, and I think it's just something that has been learned and taught throughout the generations, and one of the biggest pieces of the collective we have to heal. We bring these things to light when it comes to race or whatever the case may be, but it takes all of us and it takes us doing things now. Like for me, you typically will not find me marching anywhere. I That's just not my comfortability. I will believe in something, but you just won't see me actively out there, like in the streets, holding a banner. That's just not who I am. However, you will hear me having conversations amongst my community and my friends and my family and bringing these things up. And not so much saying this was wrong, but like asking how somebody feels about it. What did they think? What is their perspective? And when we like come at it from that way, like if you're not marching, that doesn't mean you're against whatever it is, but what are you doing to bring awareness around a specific topic that comes up? You won't really see me blasting things on my social media. That's just not who I am. But in my inner circle and my friends, you will hear me talking about it. You'll hear me asking what they think about it. You'll hear me giving my opinion about it. So, just with anything, if it's women's rights, if it's racism, if it's whatever, I think we all have a job to do. We all have a piece of this puzzle to kind of like break everybody free, right? Because I don't want you to be uncomfortable speaking to things like this just because you're a white woman, right? Like we all have this piece that we can add to the puzzle to kind of unlock this for all of us. And it's just how we show up and what we do within the moments that we have.
I did like an activism and yoga training a few years ago, and one of the things that I learned and that hit home with me is that there are just different types of activism. So I think we think of being on the front lines as like the only kind sometimes,
Mhm.
whereas like that might not be where your particular skills are best used. Um, so it's kind of like Dharma, like there are so many different paths, and it's about finding which one works for your being and has the most impact. So, yeah, I found that really difficult in 2020, especially like with the
Mm,
George Floyd protests, and they were going on in my city, and I was pregnant. And while I stood with everybody, I didn't feel comfortable putting my baby in that situation. And I did know other
right.
pregnant people who were comfortable with that, and no judgment there. But I had to figure out, other ways to be anti-racist, I suppose. So like it's figuring out what can you do and how can you have an effect on your community. So for me, that was like, okay, well, we need to have like an anti-racism training within my organization that I own,
Mm,
um, and figure out like what we can do to be better, right? And I had to be okay with that, and lending money or support or whatever it is I had available to me, and be okay with it.
yeah, and I love that you decided to like this is what I'm not comfortable doing this, but this is what I can do. This is like my piece. And it just reminds me of a conversation like when all that stuff was happening. I have a best friend, his name's Antonio, and he and I and my husband, like we would go to his place, he'd come to ours, all the things. And when all that stuff was happening, like we had a conversation and he brought up um this point to me about how Rashida, like I had to have conversation with friends because they would say things that would be totally racist, but they would still look at me in my face like they weren't saying something racist to me. And he's Hispanic and black mix, but he very much appears to be a black man. And he would say like sometimes people don't even realize that they're being racist. And they would consider themselves not to be, but because of like the conditioning and because of like how they were raised, like for instance, I'm just going to use the example he used. He said, my friend said to me, I just want an all-American girl, right?
What does that mean?
And and that's what he said. He said, "What does all American girl mean?" He's like, "Well, man, the blonde hair and the blue eyes and the," and he's like, "Oh, that's an all American girl." And then I can't remember what he told me he said after that, but he was just like very racist. Like an American isn't a white Anglo-Saxon female. Like that's not an all-American girl, and that's exactly like in my opinion, the opposite because we've all come together to have this dream of America,
Mm,
and it's not. I don't know. Do you get like it's crazy to me that one that's like the conditioning that's been given for us, but also too the fact that um we have to also have compassion, I feel like too, because if he would have said that to someone else and he could have gotten like blasted and roasted and it could have turned into a really ugly situation, because someone could have been extremely 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 offended by something he didn't really know that he was saying that was like low-key
yeah.
racist. You know what I mean? He happened to be in good company. Antonio's a pretty cool dude and he's like very educated and he knows he's very good with his words and talking things through. So that, was to his benefit and their friendship's benefit. But, I want to challenge people sometimes like think about what you're saying when it comes to like race and racial profiling and everything like that, because you might be surprised what comes out of your mouth that could really turn somebody off and make them feel like you're racist. Even on social media, like we're so quick to like type all these things out and say something when like you really look at that and you're going to look like you're racist because you're not thinking about what you're saying and you're not seeing how it is from the other person's shoes almost.
Yeah, I think that's a good call to action for sure. Also, if somebody is kind enough to call you in, um, meaning like point out to you that like you were talking about how your friend did in a kind way, right? It's not time to like be defensive. It's time to listen and say,
Mm,
"Okay, I'll try and do better," because what else can you do? You know? Our egos want to
absolutely.
like our egos sometimes want to like come to our defense. We want to protect ourselves in a way, but truly we should all be wanting to be better. And like we didn't always have access to all of these different um, opinions and viewpoints. And now
Absolutely.
that we have the internet and it's easier to share, and like that people of all races are friends together and things like that, like these conversations can hopefully be had in a really productive way. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's very disheartening to see blatant racist content, you know, blatant anti-trans, blatant um, anti-LGBTQ, whatever. Because there are some people who are very shameless about it, but I think like you're
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about, there are also people who like don't really even realize um, that they might have some hidden bias.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't want to say like that's okay, but it's okay as long as when you come from a place of awareness, you do something about it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
isn't it Maya Angelou? She's like, if you know better, do better.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not if when you know better, double down and
Which some people do. And also, it's one of those things that's like, I understand, like, if you have a belief, like, one, like, we're super powerful and what we believe, like, it is our reality, right?
Mhm.
But that's why, like, we are on this planet not by ourselves. It's also to, like, have things illuminated for us so that we can possibly like shift and change our energies and viewpoints around a certain belief. And it's just because like you do change a belief doesn't mean like everything leading up to that is not valid. Like your experience doesn't matter. I think sometimes that's why people hold on to things so much is because, you know, if I change now, then, you know, I'm a fraud or I'm a whatever, or everything I've done up until then, it's for nothing. And that's not entirely true,
Mm,
especially depending on, you know, the situation and what it is. But I agree. Lauren, I'd love to know. I know you said
mhm,
you took a class and you did something for your yoga studio. If someone is not that like activism, like standing in the streets person, what is something else that they can do?
mm. Well, one is to find out different organizations that you can donate money to. Um, that's always like there are so many organizations out there who are like boots on the ground doing the work, but they need money. So if you are in the privileged position to have money to give, then that is one way to contribute. Another one is to amplify like BIPOC voices or LGBTQ plus voices. So it's not necessarily, especially like as a white cis person or straight person, to you're not creating your own activist platform necessarily. It's better to
Mhm.
amplify voices of people who are coming from that particular perspective and to give them more
Mhm.
eyes. So those are a couple different ways. Some people do like letter writing campaigns. We did that with my yoga studio too in the last couple of years. Um, it might be calling your senator, and there are so many resources out there that make it really, really easy. I am phone phobic. I'll put it that way. But there was a campaign going on uh, a few months ago about gun control, and there was like a call to action to call your senators and Congress people or representatives, and they give you a script and everything. Like I called, just said the script, and I was nervous and my voice shook, but I did it, and that was one way for my voice to be heard. So those are just a few examples, and I'm sure there are so many more. One being like you're saying, just if you see something, say something in front of you, and to like be the change you wish to see. So yeah, lots of things that aren't front lines. And then I think especially like for us as parents to break generational cycles and to teach our kids um, how to move in this world with more love and kindness is um, certainly going to make a tremendous impact. So
Absolutely.
yeah, those are a few ways. I feel like this is a good segue actually into our topic today. I know we've already been talking for like 25 minutes, but I think these subjects are going to come up again in where we're going today.
Okay, amazing. Let's get into it, Lauren. What we
Yeah.
got today?
So we are diving back into some yogic philosophy. We do have two other episodes right now that talk about the first two limbs of yoga, the yamas and niyamas. So we can link to those in the show notes. Um, but really, we're talking about like what yoga actually is. It's not just like poses on a mat. It's a deep and ancient philosophy. It also spans many different eras and texts. So, what I am focusing on is the Yoga Sutras. It's about 2000 to 2500 years old, and it is one of the main texts that we use in modern times to connect with the philosophy of yoga. So, I definitely recommend listening to those other episodes. We even talk about what yoga is. What we'll talk about today are called the five kleshas, and kleshas Kleshas are kind of obstacles to enlightenment, or we could call them five spiritual roadblocks. And just a reminder from the previous episodes that the goal of yoga and let's say spirituality is to essentially still the mind enough so that we know who we are, which is divine. So it is like complete immersion and identification with the divine. And we have these human minds, which make it really hard to make that realization without disciplined practice. So the cliches go into like five of the obstacles that keep us from this identification with who we truly are, rather than like identification with the ego. So I'll read what the different ones are and then we'll dive deep into each one. And what I love about yoga philosophy, and I've said this before, is it's perpetually relevant. We can always relate it to our own modern lives, no matter that it was written so long ago. So the
Hmm.
learning occurs, yes, through like reading and studying, but I think it occurs most through conversation, which is what you and I will be doing today. So, if you have a copy of the Yoga Sutras, this is Sutra 2-3. I like living the sutras as a good intro book to the Yoga Sutras. So it's misperception, identity, attachment, avoidance, and fear cause pain. And we're using the word pain really as this like the obstacle to enlightenment because we're in pain when we're not connected to the divine. So misperception, identity, attachment, avoidance, and fear. So we'll dive first into misperception. The verse here is misperception is the root cause of all the obstacles that cause pain. So with this, you can think of not seeing things as they truly are, essentially. So for most of us, I'll say all of us in certain ways, we see something and it is completely colored with our past experiences, with our fears, with our opinions, with our programming, our culture. Like it is very rare that we see someone or something for truly what it is. And that's the way the mind works. We make these connections because it helps us make sense of the world.
Hmm.
But you're talking about like, we're talking about racism, right? Like, say a white person sees a black person, and instead of just seeing a person in front of them, they have all of these different ideas in their mind about who that person in front of them is, which
Hmm.
causes fear, it causes pain, it causes mistrust, it causes violence. Um, So yeah, and even for those of us who like don't consider ourselves racist or we're anti-racist or we're this or that, like those biases are still going to come up sometimes because of the nature of human beings, of being in a body, of being in a brain. So this one takes a whole lot of deprogramming. And I think being like fully present is a good way um, to combat this and to be an active listener too.
Mhm.
What comes up for you with this?
Yeah, so I really like how you like completely and totally use that example. I think that's spot on. When I think of misperception, it also like has me thinking of like the need to like really have clear sight as well, and we have clearer sight. We're tapped more in that way to our intuition and that area of our or that part of ourselves when we are, doing this like maintenance. If you okay, so you were just saying the goal of yoga is to like quiet our mind enough to, know that we are divine, right? And if we can do that enough, we know that we are divine, we are of divine. It kind of like peels back those layers in itself of misperception. Knowing that we are all one, we are all together, that we are not other, as well. So yeah, I'm 100%. I can see how this can be a roadblock, so to speak. This is very like when we think about spirituality, we're sometimes we're like, oh 5D, like we got to get out of this realm of the body, and we have to ascend up. you know be this is very like 3D. This is very like within our mind, within our brain, and even like it's within our body, like our physical human body. And I don't know, it's like one of those things. If we are truly seeking a path to spirituality, we have to have clear sight. And that's not to say we're going to have that all the time, because we are human. Like, let's remember that. Like, we are human. But having those moments, doing these practices to kind of get us in alignment with who we are, which is divine, will give us more moments of clear sight, clear vision, clear perception, and not misperception of what is truly in front of us and around us and surrounds us. And when we do that, I can see how this roadblock can, kind of like fall away. So yeah, I like this. And to me, it just like really directly just talks into like clear sight. So having some practices may be useful to work on that.
Yeah, this one also goes deeper. This one is the one the sutras spend the most time on. So it goes into different types of misperception. So one is confusing impermanence with permanence. One is pain and pleasure. Confusing pain and pleasure, truth and untruth, as well as our ego from our potential. So the first one, again, we mistake the impermanent for the permanent. So it's like when we're in this really difficult situation, it feels like it's going to last forever. But when we zoom out and find perspective, we realize that it's just temporary and that it will pass and that all things will
Mm,
pass.
hmm.
Um, we forget that things are constantly changing and shifting and we attach to a moment. I see this
Or a
happen all the
person or a
time.
relationship,
Exactly. Exactly.
a
Uh,
job.
for sure. And that becomes like, and it gets into identity, but it's like that's who we believe we are. And then we don't allow room
Yeah.
for the shifts that are meant to happen.
Yeah. Cause we're ultimately cyclical beings. Like we're supposed to like go through these cycles. And, speaking of just, AFABs or women, we that's like an internal process for us too. But even for, men as well, males, they can live by the cycle and change, and they do, not as much as we do, but we're all
Yeah.
meant to change and shift. So
Well, we're all going to die. That's
Well, yes.
just to put
Yes,
it bluntly,
Lauren.
like
Yes.
we are. And like I think the avoidance of that, and we'll talk about avoidance, but like I don't know. It's like that the saying of like live every day like your last, which like that might not be the wisest advice, but just to know like that this could end at any time, like that's going to shift the way you live and make you not cling to things quite as much or mistake
Yeah.
the permanent for the impermanent or the impermanent for the permanent. The next one was we mistake the delusion for the truth. So I think of delusion very much as um, programming, oftentimes,
Yeah, I see that.
like cultural programming, religious programming, family programming, whatever it is. Like we form all these thoughts, like I was talking about earlier, that aren't necessarily pointing to the truth. They're just opinion. They're just mistaken opinions most of the time.
Like, can we talk about that for a second? Like, I don't know, I just had this, like, thought. So, we have these opinions, these thoughts, these beliefs, these untruths that we are raised with,
Mm,
and they come from people who are also living most of the time out of alignment with their own misperceptions and all these other things. So it's not
mm.
only our own layer we have to uncover, it's the layer of everyone else that came before us too, which is hard, right? I feel like
Yeah.
it can be extremely hard. And sometimes, like, I know sometimes you just want to be like, fuck it. Like, but I think too, when you become aware of like all of this, it's too hard to not do something about it and to see things for what it is.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
absolutely.
I was like, ooh, let me get a little deep here.
um, so I'll go to the next one, which is we confuse pleasure and pain. I like the different examples that the book gives. It's like, okay, binging Netflix, for instance. It might
Okay.
feel good in the moment, but it might actually be more detrimental for you. Or like binge eating something, right? Or like drinking a bunch of alcohol. Um, there are a lot of things we do to like numb and to get like kind of fake pleasure out of
Yeah.
that ultimately cause pain, and that clouds our perception.
You know, it reminds me of like my 20s. And I'll go ahead and put myself out there. Man, could I drink and do other things. But I drank. And it almost, drinking, like sometimes it affects people differently. But for me, drinking like gave me this like inner confidence, this like social butterfly type of like energy. And I just felt like had so much courage to just like talk and speak and to be this person that I, really wanted to be. Like, let's fast forward to now Rashida 37. And damn, I don't need a drink to do that, right? And it's still who I am, but I caused my body so much harm. Like, I was that person that was like, ugh, I'm never doing this again. you know, like trying to keep something down that needs to come. I needed to purge, but I was having that like in your early 20s. You don't know just to let it happen.
Mm,
And yeah, I caused myself so much pain and harm, and like really put myself in really precarious situations for this outcome, this untruth. When I actually had access to that the whole time. I
mm,
just had all this misperception about myself, um, of why I couldn't like do the damn thing or say or be that person. So
mm. Well,
yeah.
thanks for being open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of
we,
love
we, we could
to
talk
20s
about
Rashida.
20-year-old
I mean,
Rashida.
she sounds fun too, but um, the last
I
one
was
there was
fun.
we confuse our true self. I like the book gives a quote from Fight Club, which is you're not your job, you're not how much money you have in the bank, you're not the car you drive, you're not the contents of your wallet. And I'll also say in the Barbie movie, coming back to that, this becomes one of the like major themes later on in the movie is like discovering who you truly are. And it's not the different roles, it's not our possessions. It's something that we have to discover for ourselves. So when we build a whole identity around our stuff, around our position, around our clout, whatever it might be, like
Mm,
that messes up our perception, and we're like almost objectifying ourselves.
yeah. Yeah. I feel that. It just reminds me of, like, my corporate days. And, yeah, how honestly, like, I knew I was good at my job. I was damn good at my job and
Mhm,
really good at managing my team, but there was this, like, sense of, like, not enoughness,
mhm,
unworthiness, like, I don't know all the people, I don't know the upper management, I don't know this, I don't know that, like, who am I? I'm just this service manager, right? But I also think that was part of my path and, like, trying to find my purpose too, like, it wasn't banking was not my purpose, but I can see that so much, and even not even in a corporate setting or a job setting, like, even amongst, ourselves, I find that, though, being on this path, I kinda butt up against that sometimes. Like, I think, Lauren, I know we've had conversations around that, like, of me having that feeling of, like, who am I to
mhm,
want to say or do or have these things? And, you're always a great, and also gentle, very loving reminder that you're Rashida and that's enough,
mhm.
So it's really hard sometimes to step out of that, like, know that we are not our possessions. And for me, especially, like, my family is really big on stuff. Sometimes I look around because my mom's still in the house and I'm just
Mhm.
like, oh, there's just so much stuff here. I feel stifled, especially being on this path. I wanna feel lighter and freer, and where my mom likes to, like, collect things and hold on to things, I don't think that that has anything to do with who I am, what I drive and what my house looks like and all that stuff doesn't matter to me anymore, right? And so I feel this, part really, really deeply. When we get on our spiritual path, we can let all of that stuff cloud our judgment and cloud our actual path to the divine, because you don't need $1 billion to access the divine. You need
No.
a moment. You need a moment in time
Yeah.
to connect. And
In fact,
when we
$1 billion can become an obstacle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I love that. Okay.
Yeah. So this goes right into the next one, and this one kind of just flows from that particular aspect of misperception. So it's identity or ego, just the next
Mhm.
cliche.
Hey,
So it's
Lauren,
yeah,
before you go into that, can you speak to ego? Like, what is the ego for someone who might not know? What is the
yeah.
ego?
The ego is basically like the amalgamation of all of our thoughts, emotions, perceptions. It's the part of us that's always changing. But we can heavily cling to that, thinking that that's who we truly are. So, and it kind of goes back to misperception. We forget like that who we are changes constantly. So, I could like cling so heavily to like I'm a mom, and that's where I get all of my pride. That's where measure myself in life to like, oh, I was not the most attentive mom today, so I'm not a good person, gonna punish myself. uh, essentially, it's like whatever we're identifying ourselves with. I don't know if that is the best explanation, to be honest, but
No,
it's
it
what makes
kind of
sense
makes
to me right
sense.
now.
Yeah, it makes sense. And then also too, like, when people say, your ego is trying to protect you,
Mhm.
it's because it's coming from what's known,
Mhm.
right? Like the known parts of the known aspects, what makes it up. when we decide to be aware and change, that's when our ego, I feel like, wants to like hold us back. Does that make sense too?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, this really
I know I put you on
it's
the spot. I'm so
no, it's
sorry.
okay. No, it seems like it should be a simple question to answer, but yeah, it's really like who we misidentify ourselves as. That's ego. We all have one. Yeah, it can protect us. Like we need one to get through like human life. We're not just sitting and like meditating in caves and samadhi all the time. Um, but we can pause. I think this is one of the best defenses of the ego is to pause before we react to anything. Take a deep breath
Mm,
and then react from like a truer space.
mm,
So like we said, if somebody calls you in, you can like become defensive. That's your ego. It's trying to protect itself, protect this like identity that you've formed. Or you can take a deep breath, take it in and be like, wow, like I was wrong and I can change because I is forever changing. I is ego.
right.
So ego limits us and causes pain when we confuse our identity and true nature. So I don't think we need to go too deep into this just because it really flows from the last part of misperception. But I like what it says in the book here, the last sentence. It says, we need to remember there is the unchanging true self that is greater than our appearance, achievements, and passions.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. We need to remember there is the unchanging true self that is greater than our appearance, achievements, and passions.
Is that referring to our soul?
Yes.
Mm, okay.
So I guess like when you put it that way, ego is like everything that is in our soul. When it comes to like identity.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's all like the humanness and the relationships and the conditioning or deconditioning, and it's all the other that
Yeah.
make us up.
And
That
I
have
don't
a lot
limit.
of power, I feel like. I feel like that's why the ego can have a lot of power.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. And why we must identify ourselves as, I mean, we are our, but other as well.
And I think like leading an ego led life would be the opposite of like a soul led life. So we talked about soul led living with Nikki Novo on that episode. And I think you and I can identify with that. But we've had times where the ego takes control too. Um, and we can think of probably examples of people who are likely not in touch with their soul whatsoever.
Mm,
That might be how they've accumulated so much wealth. Like I was saying, $1 billion can actually be an obstacle, right? Like that's a
yeah.
quote from the Bible. Jesus says like that it's easier for a camel to get through an eye of a needle than it is for a wealthy man to go to heaven or something like that. But it is pointing that out as an obstacle because it can take a lot of ego to desire to accumulate that much unnecessary wealth, I suppose.
Yeah, and I feel like this speaks really well into just the concept of the roadblock. I think I shared with you before
Mhm.
that there have been um, people that I've met, and also like friends of mine that have met some really big names, and they are not who they appear to be in person.
Mhm.
And so, one, that's why it's good to have discernment when you decide to follow somebody, and you
Mhm.
like really put all your eggs in one basket sometimes, so to speak. But I feel like at some point, like these people might have been like on their path to spirituality, but when we start accumulating these things, and making a name for ourselves, we might fall into that
Mhm.
and create that roadblock,
Yeah.
unintentionally. But having that check, I feel like, is where that comes in to
Yeah, it's kind of like,
illuminate that, right?
yeah, it's like using persona, um, It's like being a persona rather than a person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think there is this like persona can come from a bit of using boundaries, but it's like, then do you forget who you actually are? Um, hmm. All right, I'll move us on. Next
Yeah.
roadblock. Attachment is the next. So attachment is seeking continual pleasure and will cause pain. So it's like this, it's a desire that's never fed. Um, and when we're able to be in a place of non-attachment, it doesn't mean that we aren't experiencing and appreciating what life brings to us. It's just the knowledge that it's going to end at a certain point and being able to like grasp and let go. So we see desire come up so much. I don't think desire is necessarily evil. I think sometimes it can point us to like dharma, that sort of thing. But I think when it's never like it's a beast that's never fed, that's when it becomes this like attachment problem. So say like okay, somebody who can't have one glass of wine, right? Like one glass is never enough. I'm going to chase that feeling and have more and more. And that's going to cause pain.
Mm.
Um, so this is really similar to when we were talking about like confusing and misperception, the pleasure and the pain. Um, so I think a good way to kind of see if we're attached to something is to go without it for a little bit and
Mm.
notice how we operate without it.
Yeah, I have a question for you.
Hmm.
What do you think? So, obviously, fasts can happen in any particular way, but especially when you think of like religious fasts, right? Would this
Hmm.
be like where some of that comes from, you think?
Yeah, I think so. They're meant to kind of pull you out of your day-to-day routine and detach you from um yeah, from these attachments that we have. So you think of like Lent, for instance, that's a
Mhm.
very um common one where you choose something that you should choose something that's a little bit hard to give up, right? But
Right.
that's meant to like bring you closer to the divine or closer to God or um however they would define that. So yeah, I think that's a good example of
Yeah.
like combating this sense of attachment in a way. It's also kind of like knowing we don't truly own anything, not even our own bodies.
Yeah, because we can
Can't take it with us.
be gone. And but that makes sense when you're looking at it as the lens of who you are as the soul, right?
Mhm,
Like that's
mhm,
when that statement would make the most sense. And I think that's also like the learning as well. Like,
mhm,
yeah, I'm attached to my body. Like, this is my experience. I'm human. This is how I operate in this world. However, this is not just it.
mm,
It's this duality of spirit and body. So I do like this, and I do see how this can also be a roadblock. And like I said, just holding on to so much stuff, and in the end, it doesn't. Does it really matter?
mm.
No.
Um, I like what it's I'll read directly from the book again, but I like that it says, "It's not pleasure that's a problem, it's chasing after it. When we're chasing anything, we're not fully present in the moment."
Mm,
So when we're able to, like, let the moment pass through us in a way, we get to feel the pleasure that it brings, but we have to be fully willing to let it go when it's over. It's like, "Oh my god, this blueberry tastes so good. Okay, now it's gone. I'm not gonna go eat a bucket of blueberries." You know?
but
Or I
being
could,
able
but it's
to
not gonna, like it's not gonna hit the same.
right, yeah, but also having that moment and, being present to that moment of what just happened and what was and what is within that
Mhm.
moment. But also you can still, like, have pleasure from the memory,
Mhm.
but not necessarily be like, "I need more."
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. This also brings to mind, like, having a healthy attachment and relationship, like, it's it's not over controlling somebody, it's allowing them to be in their own experience, to be their own person. You come together when you come together, and it's beautiful, and you love each other, and then you let them do their thing as well. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like, it's releasing ownership of someone or something else.
yeah, why would anyone never mind. I'm gonna keep that to myself. Keep it to myself. Yes, I completely feel that so much.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So the next one is aversion. So kind of the opposite of attachment, but aversion is when we avoid situations because of past painful experiences. This perpetuates suffering and limits our potential. So a lot of times we avoid, like, the medicine in
Mm,
life, right? I'm going to give an example of how we naturally actually can avoid aversion. So this is something kids will do naturally. So I saw my friend's kid fell off some playground equipment, and it really hurt, and she came crying. And then she went back and she repeated the same action that caused her to fall, but, like, did it correctly, like whatever it was, sliding down a pole or something. She did it like 10 times. So her mom could have told her, like, "Oh, don't go on that again," and that would have taught her to avoid that. But what her nervous system wanted to naturally do is go back and confront it and take that fear away, right? That way it doesn't live as trauma in the body. If you think about it, as adults, like, we do this sort of thing all the time. Like, oh, my heart was broken. I'm never gonna, like, be in another relationship again.
mm,
Or, yeah, we avoid future pain when it can be the medicine that we need. Or putting it simply, let's talk about, like, a yoga class. Say there's, like, a pose that you hate, not because it is going to hurt you, but just because it's uncomfortable. Well, maybe that's something you should be practicing more, because it shows you where you're lacking strength and resilience.
mm.
Um, yeah, this one really speaks to resilience for me.
Okay. Do you mind reading it one more time for me?
Yeah. It's aversion is when we avoid situations because of past painful experiences. This perpetuates suffering and limits our potential. Okay. And they're saying that what this is suggesting is that aversion is problematic when we limit our experiences and therefore ourselves because of it.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of people avoid things because of pain,
Hmm.
right? Okay. Well, pain is there to be a teacher, right?
Hmm.
Of being possibly off path, um, as well as it's what also should give us the confidence if we're, like, in the moment and seeing what went wrong. Like, it's one of those things. It's like, let's speak to your relationship, example, when you're like, oh, I went through this hard breakup, I'm never going through this again. You know, let's look at this from the perspective of, what did I like in this relationship? Where could I have, depending on how the outcome happened, right? Where could I went wrong to make this person that I felt so deeply in love with not feel this way? And what didn't I like about this situation? And having that awareness and that thought and that courage to say, okay, this is the lesson. And this is where I need to do things differently to get,
Mhm.
whatever in the relationship. So, I also feel like avoidance can be wrapped up in our ego as well.
Mhm.
When we're operating from a very egoic mind and an egoic place, because we're worried about what the community or what the tribe thinks of us, and we're not trying to get like booted out because it's off. We look crazy or we look stupid or whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. So we also avoid not only our path and our purpose, and we're living with this pain of not being the person that we wanted to come here to be because we're so worried about everything else. So we're actually avoiding like sometimes ourselves.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I agree, like, we don't feel our emotions, we stay in our comfort zones, and there's just no growth in that
Yeah.
area, and I think our souls long for that challenge in a way,
Yeah.
and the expansion.
Well, and also too, like I remember starting this journey and getting very like I don't want to say necessarily quiet, but yeah, but getting kind of quiet and like really having that c- communication within, from the place of my mind with my soul, really having um that internal dialogue, so to speak, which is all wrapped up with emotions for me. Like that's how I feel like most in tune with my soul is really feeling into and expressing and feeling my emotions. I don't know, like sometimes it got really hard when life got a little hard and when I might have said something to somebody and they just looked at me a certain way or they were like, okay, so I, from time to time, had avoided that part of myself, but it was so much harder and so much more painful to not feel that direct connection
Mhm.
than the other aspect of someone thinking that I'm whatever. So I don't know. It's very true. Having aversion and avoidance, I think, is a safety mechanism,
Mhm.
but more so in this perspective for the ego.
Yes. I think you've really, like, hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. You're such a great yoga student.
Oh, thanks.
Uh, the last one is fear of death, loss, or change causes pain in everyone. Fear of death, loss, or change causes pain in everyone. I think that's something we can all identify with, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's so funny because the nature of everything has changed, like we talked about earlier, and somehow I think it's the ego, like we attach, and the change becomes something that we're very afraid of. It becomes something we have an aversion to, even. But like accepting death and rolling with life's punches, like riding the wave, that is how we avoid, the pain of it. Really, is through this like profound acceptance. It doesn't really make someone else dying less painful necessarily, um, but I think it allows us to like not fixate on our own deaths, but also
Yeah.
not like deny them.
Yeah. I feel like this is a very interesting one. I think I know deaths are okay. I'm not going to say I know because I know I don't know everything, but I feel like death is meant to, in a way, be a celebration. And when we come from that from a place of like, okay, let me restart. I know when I was not on this path, death was a very big fear of mine, It was almost to the
Mhm.
point because I felt like that I would no longer be, that I was living my life to either get in or go under, that this was it. This was all that there is. And so when we think about that, we're operating from that place, I feel like. And so not only are we like fearful, living our lives in fear, not being to our fullest potential because we're afraid of this ending, instead of like looking at it for like what it is. And I know that this is like really hard. Like for instance, I don't know what I would do if anything were to happen to any of my kiddos, right? But I have a big belief, and in a way, like sometimes I do think about it. Like I think it's kind of hard not to like kind of have that like in your mind, just being honest. But I don't allow I'm very careful with them, but I do not allow their experience to be like what's the word I'm looking for? Like caged, because I'm worried like I'm going to lose them. Does that make sense? Like,
Mhm.
so when we think about death as an experience, like our celebration, like when it does happen, because it is inevitable, like, you know, I've had this conversation with my grandmother. She's like, I do not want this big fancy funeral. I don't want everyone crying and hee hawing over me. You know, I don't want this thing. I want you to really celebrate my life. I really want you to celebrate how I showed up and how I made a change within you or my community or whatever. Like, that's the celebration piece. Like, I feel like death is like to allow us to, I don't know, like see that we are limit like we our time is limited, but also like that is when the review, that is when we can go into the past and really like celebrate this person's past and like what they've done. Um and then when it comes to loss too, I feel like yes, there is always a potential for loss. But if we're leading from that place of like I'm going to lose out, whether it's a relationship or a person or items, we are still limiting ourselves. We are still like not living to our fullest potential because this thing is always in the back of our mind. I think we should be aware that it's a possibility, but not create our actions around that outcome.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I don't have much to add, to be honest. Yeah, it's tenuous. We want to like respect death, and of course, God, I can't even like think about a death of a child or something like that. It's like the most horrible thing you can think of. Um, but yeah, all of this just points to recognizing who we truly are and being in touch with our souls, seeing the ego for what it is. Um, Not that it always makes things easier, but it at least opens up our perception. Um, I'll say in the sutras goes on to talk about like eliminating these obstacles, but the number one remedy that it gives is meditation,
Mm,
because meditation allows us to zoom out, notice all of these things, shine light on them, and to also see them for what they are, which is that which is always changing, not the true self. And it allows us to sit in the seat of the observer, of the soul. So, but it takes a lot of practice. I was thinking about when we were talking about aversions, how people avoid meditation because they don't want to sit with themselves. Okay, baby. If she wants a Mickey Mouse pancake. Um, but it's truly the medicine that we need to truly know ourselves,
yeah.
to be with ourselves.
It's almost like that. I think I shared on the pod before, but there was a moment in my life where I would not look at myself in the mirror. Like I was avoiding myself
Mhm.
because I didn't want to see, and I agree with you. Like, we do that because it's hard to like see ourselves when we're
You know,
not in alignment and we're aware of it. Does that
I
make
think,
sense?
yeah, it does. And what I was going to say doesn't necessarily come from the sutras, but it's just my own personal experience and belief is like these things are going to happen. We're human. We're going to have times where we don't want to be with ourselves. We're going to have times where we are experiencing all of these different kleshas. And can we hold that with love? And I think when we hold that with love, with compassion, that puts us in the seat of the observer, of the soul, of our true selves. Um, so it's like there can be a little part of you that sees you having a hard time even looking in the mirror and love on that person
Mm-hmm.
because they deserve it. The same way you'd look at your child going through that and just, give them all your love.
Yeah. I think like this is like calling to that piece that it's not like black and white. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
everything is valid and good and needs to be seen. When we think about like shadows and shadow work and getting deep, like it's important to, acknowledge the shadow and look into the shadow, illuminate the shadow.
Hmm.
That's part of the experience. So it's everything is needed. And this is just like, the really big goal, going through all of this, looking at all this, seeing these 5 areas, where we can see where we might be blocking ourselves. I mean, you're right. The goal is to like quiet ourselves enough, get past all this stuff enough to like remember
Hmm.
remember who we are. I feel that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a little girl here who is asking for Mickey Mouse
And
pancakes.
she is asking very nicely.
She is,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
And
If
my
I,
little girl is wanting to change into a butterfly outfit. So she
oh,
she keeps peeking her head. Are you done? Are you done? Can we change clothes now? So I think this is a great place to start. Lauren, or stop. But Lauren, thank you so much for going through this with us. It's just another thing to like help us on our path and, see just how deep yoga is, right? It's very, very deep and a way in which we can really work on our spirituality. So thank you so much for your wisdom.
Yeah. Thank you, Rashida, for being vulnerable and sharing everything in this episode. Um, I hope that you, listener, have had a lot to like think on and that this will, maybe be a point of discussion in your own lives too, not just the obstacles, but um, activism and anti-racism and all of these things that we are talking about today. They're not always easy conversations to have, but they're important. And I'm happy that we are not avoiding them, right? We're just confronting
Mm,
them with love. And I think there's a lot of positive change that can be made there.
absolutely. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I
love you,
love you, friends.
bestie.
Love you
Love
too.
you, listeners. We love you so much,
Yes.
and we will chat soon.
Bye bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this incredible episode. If you loved it, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and tell all your besties about us.
You can also connect with us on Instagram at Your Spiritual Besties Podcast. And be sure to say hello and share your thoughts about the episode. Love you, bestie. Talk soon.